The Two Oxen, a famous story by Munshi Premchand. This story revolves around two oxen, Hira and Moti. After getting separated from their owner, they face many difficulties but never leave each other's side, eventually making their way back to their old master. Among animals, the donkey is considered the most foolish. When we want to call someone extremely dumb, we call them a donkey. Donkeys are indeed foolish, or maybe their simplicity and extreme endurance have earned them this reputation. This is still unclear. Cows are gentle animals but can sometimes use their horns. Dogs, too, are poor creatures, but they can get angry sometimes. However, donkeys never seem to get angry. You can hit them as much as you want, give them the worst, rotten grass, and you'll never see a sign of displeasure on their face. Perhaps in the month of April, they might bray a little, but I have never seen them happy. A permanent expression of despair seems to rest on their faces. Whether it's joy or sorrow, profit or loss, they remain unaffected. The virtues that sages and monks aspire to, such as patience and tolerance, are all present in donkeys, yet humans call them foolish. Such insults to noble qualities are hard to find elsewhere. Perhaps this world has no place for innocents. However, the donkey has a brother who is not quite as foolish as him, the ox. Some people might be willing to call the ox the leader of the fools, but that is not my opinion. The ox can sometimes retaliate, and occasionally we encounter stubborn oxen who express their displeasure in various ways. Therefore, the ox holds a higher position than the donkey. Juri, a farmer, had two oxen, one named Hira and the other, Moti. Both were beautiful to look at, hardworking, and strong. Having lived together for a long time, the two oxen had developed a deep bond. Whenever they were yoked to the plough or the cart, they would move in sync, each trying to bear the heavier burden. They would eat from the same trough, and if one stopped eating, the other would too. They would sit together as well. One day, Juri sent the two oxen to his in-laws' house for a few days. The oxen didn't understand why they were being sent away. They thought their master had sold them. If only they had a voice, they might have asked Juri, "Why did you abandon us? We never complained about the food you gave us. We ate everything you provided, bowing our heads in gratitude. Then why did you sell us?" After some time, the oxen reached their new village. They had not eaten all day and felt heavy-hearted. The place they considered home was now gone. When night fell, they managed to break free from their ropes and headed back home. The next morning, Juri woke up to find both oxen standing at the feeding trough. Their legs were covered in mud up to their knees, and their eyes reflected a mix of love and anger. Juri was overwhelmed with affection and ran to embrace them. The children of the village gathered around, clapping and welcoming the oxen back. Some brought bread, others brought jaggery, and some even brought bran for them. When Juri's wife saw the oxen at the door, she was irritated and said, "What ungrateful animals. They didn't even work for a single day and ran back." Juri couldn't tolerate this accusation against his oxen. Ungrateful? They must not have been given enough food. What else could they do, he argued. His wife snapped back, "Of course, only you know how to feed oxen. Everyone else just gives them water." The next day, Juri's brother-in-law, Gaya, came to take the oxen back again. This time, he yoked them to a cart. After reaching home in the evening, Gaya tied them up with thick ropes and gave them dry hay. Hira and Moti were not used to this treatment. Juri never hit them, not even with a flower stick, but here they were beaten and given dry hay. They didn't even look at the trough. The next day, Gaya yoked them to the plough, but they refused to move. At one point, when Gaya hit Hira on the nose with a stick, Moti, enraged, lost control and ran off with the plough. If it weren't for the thick ropes around their necks, they would have escaped. Moti stood defiantly, but Gaya caught them and dragged them back. That evening, they were given dry hay once again. Both oxen stood silently. That night, a little girl came out with 2 pieces of bread and placed one in each of their mouths. This girl was Gaya's daughter. Her mother had passed away, and her stepmother used to beat her. She had developed a sense of empathy for the oxen. Every day, the oxen would be yoked, beaten, and tied up in the evening, and the little girl would secretly give them a piece of bread. One night, after the girl had given them bread, the oxen began chewing on their ropes. But the ropes were too thick for their mouths. As they struggled, the door of the house opened, and the same girl came out. The oxen lowered their heads and licked her hand. She stroked their foreheads and said, "I'll untie you. Run away, or else they will kill you. Today, there was talk of putting a nose ring on you." She untied their ropes and then cried out, "Oh, father! Oh, father! The oxen from uncle's house are running away. Run, run!" Gaya, in a panic, rushed outside and began chasing after the oxen, but they ran even faster. When Gaya saw that they were slipping out of his grasp, he turned back to gather some other men from the village to help him. By then, the oxen had gotten the perfect opportunity to escape. They ran straight ahead, without any concern for the path, and covered a great distance. Eventually, they stopped by a field and began thinking about what to do next. Both were extremely hungry, so they started grazing on the peas growing in the field. Once their bellies were full, they began jumping around in joy. Suddenly, they noticed a big, strong bull swaggering towards them. The two friends braced themselves for a fight. As soon as Hira charged at the bull, Moti attacked from behind. When the bull turned towards Moti, Hira began pushing from the other side. As the bull, now wounded, turned back in fury, Hira dug his horns into its side. Defeated and injured, the poor bull ran away, and the two oxen chased it far into the distance. Only when the bull collapsed from exhaustion did they stop pursuing it. Filled with a sense of victory, they strutted proudly and returned to the pea field. But as they began to eat again, two men with sticks arrived and surrounded the oxen. The next day, both friends found themselves locked up in the Kanji House. For the first time in their lives, there wasn't even a straw to eat. There were several buffaloes, goats, horses, and donkeys, but none of them had any fodder. They all lay on the ground like lifeless beings. That night, with no food to eat, Hira said, "I feel like I'm dying." Moti replied, "Don't lose hope so quickly, brother. Think of a way to escape from here." The wall of the enclosure was made of mud. Hira dug his sharp horns into the wall and began making a hole. Then he started charging at the wall repeatedly. Hearing the sound of the headbutts, the pound's watchman came out with a lantern. When he saw what was happening, he struck both oxen several times with his stick and tied them with a thick rope. But Hira and Moti didn't give up. They began pushing the wall with their horns again. Finally, a part of the wall collapsed. As soon as the wall fell, all the animals, including horses, sheep, goats, and buffaloes, got up and ran away. Only Hira and Moti remained behind. By morning, the officers, watchmen, and other staff were in a panic. Afterward, the oxen were severely punished and tied with even thicker ropes. For a whole week, the two oxen remained tied up in the pound. The staff there seemed utterly hurtless. No one gave the poor animals even a single straw to eat. Sometimes they were shown water, but that was their only sustenance. Both oxen became weak, and their bones started showing. One day, a drumbeat sounded outside the enclosure, and by midday, 40 to 50 people had gathered. The two oxen were brought out, and people came to look at them but quickly left. Who would want to buy such weak animals? Then, a man with red eyes approached and began talking to the pound officer. Just the sight of him made the two oxen tremble with fear. After the auction, the man bought both oxen and took them with him. Suddenly, Hira and Moti felt that this path looked familiar. Yes! This was the same road Gaya had taken them down to the village. The same fields, the same gardens, the same village. Their pace quickened, and all their tiredness, weakness, and despair disappeared. Oh! This was their own field. There was their well, where they drank water every day. Filled with joy, they dashed towards home, galloping and playing, and reached their stable. The man followed behind them. Juri was sitting at the door, eating his meal, but when he saw the oxen, he ran towards them and began petting them lovingly. Tears welled up in the oxen's eyes. The man who bought them grabbed their ropes, but Juri said, "These oxen are mine." "How are they yours?" The man replied, "I bought them in the auction." He then tried to forcefully take the oxen away. At that moment, Moti lunged with his horns, and the man stepped back. Moti chased him out of the village, with the villagers laughing and watching the spectacle. When the man finally gave up and left, Moti returned proudly. In no time, their trough was filled with fodder, mustard cake, husk, bran, and grain. The oxen began to eat, while Juri stood nearby, watching them with a smile. Dozens of children had gathered to watch the scene, and the entire village seemed to be smiling. At that moment, Juri's wife came and kissed the oxen on their foreheads.